Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh Polly, it's for your sake alone. I left my dear old father, my country and my home. I left my dear old mother to weep and to mourn. I am a rebel soldier and far from my home. It's grape shot and musket and the cannon lumber loud. There's many a mangled body, the blanket for their shroud. There's many a mangled body left on the fields alone. I am a rebel soldier and far from my home.
Okay, I'm James White. Thanks for joining me here on Northwest Liberty News, the critical disclosure portion of the show. It is the 22nd day of October, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me here in the broadcast. Everything's working properly. I should be simulcasting on quite a few stations here now. Looks like the streams are working properly. I think the YouTube thing, until I get this thing all figured out with the YouTube, the feedback issue, the channel, you're going to have to switch over to the proper channel on YouTube, and I'm going to remove this one. Actually, I'm going to go in here and click in here. And we should have people coming into this broadcast now. Thanks so much again for joining us today here. It is lots going on in the world, but that doesn't change the fact that we still have parents, many parents here that are having their lives turned upside down by Child Protective Services. And I'm going to try to go in here. Just bear with me here, folks. I'm going to see if there's anybody else waiting here in this other area. And I'm just going to let them know that to go to the new feed. Let's see, go to... Now, I'm trying to get this all worked out here, folks, where I don't have to do this, but for now I have to, because I can't get this thing figured out with all the technology here. It's feeding back on me. At any rate, we're going to move forward here today with Mark and Terry Stamen are going to continue their interview series here on the broadcast, and today's show is called Kidnapped in Kentucky. Actually, I'm on the wrong... Actually, the show is called Kidnapped in Kentucky, and we're going to bring him on here right now. Actually, let me get this right here. Sorry, folks. I'm getting this stuff worked out here, and this stuff really irritates me. I'll get this stuff worked out here pretty soon, so let me change the title here. And I know they're holding on the other line here, and I can appreciate that. Let me change the title here to this one because it's for yesterday's show. And be with you in 1 second here. Again, folks, appreciate you bearing with me here on this live broadcast as I'm trying to get this technology figured out. And there we go. Okay, so people are starting to come in the chat room. We'll be ready to go here in just a moment, about 30 seconds. And there we go. All right. All right, folks. Again, thanks so much. Sorry for the dead air time here. Trying to get this stuff worked out. We'll be ready to go here in just 1 second. And we'll have Mark and Terry on the line. And there we go. We updated that. All right. Oh, Mark and Terry Stamen, thanks so much for joining us here. Let me take the mute off you here. There we go. Are you with us? There we go. Mark and Terry Stamen, thanks so much for joining us here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm working out these. Really, I'm trying to improve and increase, of course, the audience and get the word out to more. And I'm trying to broadcast on multiple platforms. I'm trying to get this software all worked out. And I've been having some issues the last couple of days, but I appreciate your patience. And thanks so much for joining us here. We got a little bit extended time today, so we're going to go. We got more than an hour available if we need it. But Mark and Terry Stamen, thanks so much for joining us here on Critical Disclosure and Northwest Liberty News.
Good morning to you, Jim. Thank you for having us back on your show. We're just really honored to be with you. And, you have it appropriately named Critical Disclosure because we, along with so many other people who are going through these travesties, must expose these people who are taking our children unlawfully, kidnapping, which is an appropriate term, and it's the use of our system to kidnap our children. And years ago, their laws were put in place, with very severe penalties to prevent these kind of things happening. But they are happening, and there are some questions. It's CPS they don't kidnap kids, but when you have the evidence and you can put forth and show the picture, it's going to I hope bring the American people to a place where we're going to have to rise up to act to stop it. Because as we begin today's show, Jim, one of the questions running through my mind is, why am I sitting here? Why are Terry and I sitting here having to bring this forward to the American people, having traveled such an extensive path through our system of government, whether it be through the state level in Kentucky, up through our federal government, and we sit here today without our children who are being held hostage, essentially, away from us, where we have the evidence, we can prove that they were taken unlawfully, and all of that will be coming out in the days ahead. But in getting into today's show, Jim, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the fraud and the people who are involved based on some of the things that we're going to be putting out, in addition to the lawlessness. But it's important for the people that they understand the storyline so that they can take in the full extent of what has happened to us and what we believe has been happening to other people, at least in the state of Kentucky, most likely, because this is a long running thing based on the evidence, and perhaps even throughout our country, as this self-acclaimed, or this court system in Jefferson County, Kentucky, is a self-acclaimed national model.
No, indeed. I mean, you have a voluminous amount of data that you've sent to me and information that you've sent to me that there's no question in my mind that your children were taken unlawfully. And then, crimes were committed when that happened. And, folks, here's the thing. It's called kidnapping in Kentucky. And people say, well, that's a little bit of a harsh term. Let me tell you, when you take someone's children without due process and you don't follow the lawful procedures, which, is questionable anyway, if the state should ever be able to come in and really take your children. I mean, that's a whole discussion we can have in another show. But when they come in and take your children unlawfully and act upon you unlawfully, taking your children, it's called kidnapping. It'd be no different than some guy walking down the street that crawled through the back window of your house and snatched your child, like they did a few years ago with that girl, Elizabeth Smart, I think. They crawled into her room and took the child and they kidnapped her. I mean, that's basically what they did. So that word is not too strong. We've been hearing some flack, well, kidnapping is too strong. No, it's not. It's not too strong at all. It's kidnapping. That's exactly what it is. And I'm going to keep calling it kidnapping.
Yes, indeed, Jim. So today we just, we do have some documents to share with everybody. We kind of left off on the events of April 2nd, where I had met with Jefferson County Deputy Sheriff. His name was Will Chambers, having, presented to him evidence based on what we had seen in the previous interview about what constitutes a forged document, which is a class felony in the state of Kentucky, and clearly showing that they were incomplete written instruments. There weren't even the proper check marks on some of these documents as far as, whether custody was granted or not. And the best thing that we got out from that gentleman that night, even though he sat and listened to me for a couple hours, with a witness, that I should just check the court docket to see if we were on a docket, which we could not. We could not verify whether we were actually even on a court docket. We attempted to try, but it doesn't list the names. So there was a question as to whether or not anything that was happening to us was even legitimate. And we have plenty of suspicion up to this point, very early on, even before our children were taken, and looking for just an investigation just based on the documents. Maybe we had talked about, how the supervisor, Roy Hardy, had, served court process on us on April the 1st, which is not in accordance with court rules, and really is a violation of, the overall process as to how that's supposed to unfold. And so, in presenting this, you kind of look for someone to act on your behalf, being that this would definitely be a questionable good faith action. I mean, how could that be a good faith action when you've got such suspicious documents and other questions, and yet nothing was done, which just kind of raises, the additional questions. Well, why not? Right? At least at that early stage. We were just trying to prevent this from going forward any further, but it did. And so we just kind of want to pick up on the storyline from that point, because after that, you know, on the 3rd and the 4th, we were just kind of looking to, you know, try to find legal counsel, because we had not been able to acquire it up to that point. But, you know, one strange thing did happen. You know, we talked a little bit before about that there was an arrest warrant, a bench warrant put out for me on April the 1st. In the last interview, we showed some documents on that. We'll go through a couple of those again. But, you know, all this time, no one's showing up to arrest me or, you know, Terry or none of that. And it was just very strange. And so how you could have, you know, a bench warrant established and no one acting on it. But on April the 4th, around 7 o'clock at night, we did get someone in plain clothes attempt to deliver another set of summons to our door. And they didn't like knock on the door and wait to see if we answered. They just kind of stuck them in the door and walked off. And we didn't know who this was, you know, and we'll take a look at those things here in a minute. So there's all these questionable activities, because with the summons, I mean, in an emergency custody action, you're supposed to be served 4 different things, I think, all at the same time. At least I know the emergency custody order and the summons are supposed to be served together along with the petition. We'll take a look at a couple of those things just to kind of refresh some of the people's minds on where we are with that. So if we want to go ahead and open up the documents, Jim, we'll get started in a sequence. The first one here, I just want to show the people that the actual state law, the KRS 610050, where it talks about the temporary change in custody. And we'll go through these a little bit slower so people can take them in. But I've highlighted this before, but you will see at the bottom in the bold underline when the summons is served. Okay, the ECO, the emergency custody order, is supposed to be served with the summons. And all of the so-called deliverances of the ECOs or summons, neither one of those were ever served together. And the summons never accompanied the petition as is required by the court rules and procedure, which raises the question again, the legitimacy of it. You know, I mean, these are supposed to be our government officials acting in accordance with law on behalf of public service, and yet none of this is giving any evidence that this is a legitimate process. And then again at the top, no emergency removal or temporary custody order shall be effective unless the provisions of KRS 620 are followed. Now, we touched upon this before, that we showed a couple examples where portions of KRS 620 were not followed. So at any provision of KRS chapter 620 where it's not followed in this process makes the emergency custody order of no effect. And we will be bringing forward detailed evidence to show how in numerous subsections of KRS chapter 620, those processes were not followed, thus making all of the emergency custody orders that we are showing and will continue to show of no effect, that they are illegitimate and our children remain in a hostage situation, that they have been kidnapped, because without a custody order, a legitimate valid custody order, they have been kidnapped. But for today's show, I want to continue on and just laying the groundwork for some things as we go forward. So you just go on to the next slide here, Jim, if you would, please.
Yeah, and I just want to make that clear. Folks, you have to understand, when the law is not followed, they're the ones that wrote these laws, and they don't follow them themselves. They violate their own laws. And when you violate the law to take someone's children, it's called kidnapping. I just want to make that clear. Please continue.
Yeah, thank you for underscoring that point, Jim. So on the next slide, you'll see the FCRPP, and we've shown this a couple of times before, but again, paragraph 2 is the one I want people to really take in. Is they notice in Statement of the Rights and a blank affidavit of indigency, which contain the contents of the official AOC form to DNA 2.2, notice of emergency removal, and the financial statement, affidavit, and requests for counsel and order shall be served with the emergency custody order. At no point in the deliverance of any of these documents were all of these things served with any emergency custody orders. Like, they all came out piecemeal, as if there was some sort of a script being played out, and like, oh, we'll just deliver this one, you know, this day, and we'll deliver this one another day or another time. And, you know, there was no petition attached to any of the summons, even though the summons says that a copy of the petition is supposed to be attached, and we'll look at that again later. So I just want to show this again, that, you know, shall be is defined in state law as a mandatory action. Shall is mandatory. So where they're not doing this, then obviously they're not complying with their own rules, process, procedures, and state law. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So this document here is one that we showed in one of our previous interviews regarding our daughter Elena. But here I just want to show again that this document was one of several, times 7, that was served by the social services worker on April the 1st. And of course, our daughter's name is misspelled, it's incomplete. But you'll see it does have a timestamp. It does have a date and timestamp on it of April 1st at 3:34. But the boxes at the top are not checked in. And it's kind of interesting because whenever I submitted a motion throughout this entire process, when we went through the clerk of court's office, every one of our pages was stamped as being entered into court. And yet these documents, many of these documents, from the affidavits that we showed before to the ones that you'll see here, and as we bring others forth, many of the documents are not stamped in other places, only select ones in certain locations, which was very strange. So I want to highlight here, though, on this one, it had a date of the ECO. If you go in to the next slide, and then the one after that, where it shows the actual signature of April 1st. Now, we don't have a summons dated April 1st. We have a summons dated March 31st that we showed previously. And so it's just kind of interesting that, like I said, these things were coming out piecemeal. All right, we can go on to the next slide. Now I'm showing a temporary custody order statute in KRS 620990, and I just kind of threw this in because there was a question as to the timing of how these things came out. And you kind of see there in the highlighted portion, it says if there's no action taken within 72 hours, and I think it does take into account a suspension of the computation of time over the weekend, that the emergency custody order is dissolved automatically, and the cabinet shall return the child to the parent. Now, in our situation, this ECO that we just showed for April 1st came out, around 3:30 on April the 1st, and then that was a Friday. And so then we had the Monday, Tuesday, and then I think the temporary removal hearing that they had scheduled was for April the 6th. So we were taking a look at the timing, and I think on this one, I think it did meet the 72-hour threshold. But again, there were so many different ECOs coming out, or allegedly, we were being told that were out there, that was a real question as to whether or not when the computation of time began and ended. So you can go on to the next slide. What I want to get into here, Jim, we showed this on the last one, but a couple of things I want to highlight here. Toward the bottom in respect to the bench warrant. It's very interesting that, in this section where it says it is further ordered that, and you'll see an annotation there, cash bond of $5,000. And it doesn't really say why in this document as to why this bench warrant was issued. The supposition was, oh, well, we didn't go to court on that date. But, was it because of a lack of adherence, compliance with a summons that was highly questionable? Because Terry received one, and yet she wasn't identified as being, subject to any sort of a warrant. And so what was this for? So you go on to the next slide, and you'll see the actual arrest warrant. And again, this came out supposedly on April the 1st, and all peace officers in the state of Kentucky. And when you zoom in a little bit here, you will see just above where the court stamp is, there's an annotation, defendant may post bail in the amount of $5,000 secured by full cash. And when you scroll up a little bit, in the block above that, it'll say to answer the following for contempt. Now, contempt is a criminal, that's a criminal charge, all right? And there's a whole different process of, at the top of the warrant, it says bench warrant is criminal. I mean, there's rules of criminal procedure that a defendant is to be afforded in respect to a charge. Now, I never knew that I was being charged with contempt of court. I just got this document where it says a bench warrant for me. And until we went into the court file in November of 2016, I never knew that this warrant ever existed. It was only after we saw 7 copies of this, only for me, that we were able to retrieve it and, began the process of a deeper investigation, because there's something definitely wrong here, which you will see in respect to the $5,000 annotation. And this is just something that we found, but you can zoom back out of that and go on to the next slide, because I'm going to show you something here in respect to contempt. This was another annotation of an envelope that was in the court file that we were able to retrieve. So contempt for $5,000. I just put that on there so people could see that if they couldn't see it on the previous document, that it's actually typed out right there. So you can go on to the next slide. But you will see here in state law, okay, that when you're charged with contempt, at least from what I can read here, and you can enlarge that if you like, but it says a person committed to prison for contempt shall not be admitted to bail. And so I was looking at this and I was like, well, if you're charged with contempt, how can you have a cash bond? It's just a question that I had, and it didn't appear to me then that this could have been a legitimate thing. And it looked to me even as a deeper form of extortion, because if you're arrested and you're sitting in jail and contempt is usually a situation based on when they actually did put me in jail, that they said, oh, you're here until your next court hearing, which was, according to them, 7 days away. And so it's just very strange, because they're like, well, you're not admitted to bail. So like one side was telling me, oh yeah, you got to pay $35,000 bail, $5,000 each. And then another officer down in the corrections area was saying, oh no, you're here until your next court hearing. So there was all this conflicting information, circulating, and it didn't seem to mesh with the actual KRS in respect to, if you're charged with contempt, is their bail afforded. So to me, it didn't look like it was legitimate. So just putting that out there just for information purposes. So you can go on to the next slide, Jim, if you would. And this was one of the commitment orders that we retrieved out of the court file in November of 2016. And strangely, there's one of 2 of these and that exist. And we'll get to the next one here in a minute. But you can see here that in the commitment order, there's a couple of really strange things here. You can read underneath, it says to the Jailer Department of Corrections, it says that defendant, namely me, has been found guilty of the following: contempt until the children are produced. Now, I do know this much about the rules of criminal procedure, Jim, and that is that if you're charged with something, you're entitled to due process, which be in respect to making a plea, having a trial. How is it that you can be found guilty of something without even being put on trial or even being charged? I mean, these documents just kind of appear in the court file. We were never served any of this. I was never told that, I'm being investigated or charged with a crime or any of that stuff. These things just kind of show up. And then down in the lower right-hand corner of this document, you'll see a signature of a judge or a clerk. No signature. So, without a signature, can the document really be valid? And then you'll see there in the middle where it says that, oh, the children are to be released to the temporary custodian, Julie Asa, who now, who was eventually given our kids, whose brother, Danny, is on the Louisville Metro Police Department, who at one time was demoted a rank. So he obviously got into some sort of trouble. We don't know exactly what that is. We do know he went through a demotion. And so, there's all these things going on, and it's raising all these questions, because even the children in the videos that we had shown, even they ask if they wonder if she had, coordinated with her brother to facilitate this scheme, because one of the cars that he was driving at the time was like one of the unmarked cars that was in the parking lot in the videos. We don't know if he was actually there, but she does walk down the street and walk one of the car and talks to him, as you will see in the video. So on this, so if you go on to the next slide, Jim, I'm going to show you the second one of these that's in the court file. And it's very strange because it's got void written all over it. If you look at it upside down, you'll see it's got all these different things in here. And so it's like, So after, sitting in jail on April 6th for 22 hours, and we'll talk more about that later, I got a letter from my attorney saying that I have not been charged with a crime. So is the attorney not informed? Was this charge dismissed when I was never even actually charged? I mean, it's just very strange how this whole process unfolded. So one thing I want to show you in the next slide, Jim, is that the reason that we hear a lot of things about when mothers and fathers have their children taken, okay, and so many people, fathers or mothers end up in jail for something. They just come up with something. Under the Adoption and Safe Families Act that the Clintons signed in the law in 1997, one of the sections in the law, Public Law 10589, there are grants that are given from the federal government to the state for children of prisoners. And so on this document, I just want to highlight that, are people being put in jail is like another revenue stream for, for this money, So you'll see there in section D in red, parental rest, results in problems for the children. Yes, it does. When children are taken away from their parents, or they hear that, allegedly their parent did something so wrong, they have put in jail for them, it creates a lot of stress, and it upsets their entire world. So there's a lot of pain in the separation, and these things shouldn't be happening anyway, but they are. But they use this as a basis for giving this grant money, which is our tax money. And if you go on to the next slide, you'll see how this plays out. In the highlighted section there in yellow, you'll see where it says children of prisoners means one or both parents who are incarcerated in a federal, state, or local correctional facility. So basically what they do is, they'll provide this service, and it's an additional revenue stream. My understanding and my thought is this money, grant money from the federal government, goes to the state. I don't know if the actual people who have custody of the children benefit in any way, but I just wanted to put this out there that there's a tie-in to the actual grant money, and why maybe in our situation, one of us was targeted to be put, identified as being put in jail. And again, I was released the next day with no notification that, there was any dismissal of charge, or even if there was a charge. But, guilty of contempt until the children are produced. Well, if you're guilty of contempt, you should be guilty of a crime that should result in some sort of a penalty, not until the children are produced. I mean, it's just really strange how that whole thing unfolded. So, where I'm sitting, Jim, and then go on to the next slide, I'm looking at this is when you look at how this thing all kind of played out, to zero in on me as the father, and how they were trying to just get us down to the courthouse, just get us to the courthouse. And really it seemed like there was more concern of getting us into the court system, into this family court, than there was really securing the needs of our daughter. So was there entrapment going on? I mean, like Roy Hardy delivering, court process when he's not allowed to under court rules, form of entrapment. So there is a KRS that governs entrapment, and people can kind of see right there kind of what it says. But so, a lot of evidence here kind of points to a form of entrapment, especially when you look at what the service of summons and the fact that, Terry didn't go, and so, but nothing happened to her. So is someone looking out for her, someone with influence? I mean, it's a legitimate question, kind of, deserves an answer that we've never gotten an answer to. So if you go on to the next slide, Jim, we'll continue the process here. So one of the things I want to show in respect to the arrest warrant, okay, if that is indeed incorrect, that you cannot have cash bond in respect to a contempt charge, then in paragraph 6, it would meet that criteria for a forged document. To falsely complete a written instrument means to transform by adding or inserting or changing matter, an incomplete written instrument into a complete one without the authority of anyone entitled to grant it, so that the complete instrument appears or purports to be in all respects an authentic creation or fully authorized by its ostensible maker or drawer. So do we have here a situation where the arrest warrant itself was never really issued by a judge, but maybe someone forging documents with influence, and that this entire thing is just fraudulent, and all of this money the kidnapping of our children, them being held hostage this entire time is all based on fraud and forgery, incomplete written instruments. Pretty suspect with a lot of evidence behind it. So if you continue on to the next slide, Jim, we're going to look into some other things here. Forgery in the second degree, forgery in the first degree. We looked at these a little bit in previous interviews, but with the intent to defraud, clearly, I mean, these documents meet this criteria. These are, like I said, class felonies. Go on to the next slide. Forgery in the first degree with the only difference I could see between forgery in the first or forgery in the second is that forgery in the first has to do with the issue of money or securities. So like we showed, if the state of Kentucky is benefiting by an arrest of a person like me, and through the mentoring program, dissemination of funds, and this is based on forged or fabricated incomplete written instruments showing the fraud, then this would rise to the level of a class C felony, which is a whole lot more jail time. So, here's all this evidence that we have, and we're bringing this to all these people, and definitely not good faith actions, more concerned with seems to be other things than really the welfare of an allegation of our child being in imminent danger. And yet nobody wants to take the case or investigate or prosecute. It's pretty interesting how we're living in the midst of situations like this.
Well, it's not, it clears up. And like I said before on the program, if you, what you're saying and what you're proving, what you're displaying here doesn't make sense to the average person, because they go, this doesn't really make sense. Why aren't they acting on this? But if you look at it from the perspective that this is a kidnapping ring and that they do this as a rule, right? This is how they operate. When you start looking at it from that perspective, it all makes sense. When you think that they're actually trying to reunite families and help children, none of this makes sense. But when you look at it from a trafficking aspect and they're kidnappers, again, the clarity begins to appear. Please continue.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Those are excellent points. And, as we bring forth additional evidence, I'm pretty sure the people are going to be able to piece all this together and see it exactly for what it is and what we've been looking at over these last 4.5 years. We haven't been having to live out, these atrocities looking for justice. And yet here we sit still ignored and still denied our kids. And they are not in a better place. And that's really the great tragedy of this entire situation is they claim to be giving our children a better life. They play with their minds. They lie to them, and while they're destroying their parents' lives and their livelihoods and really the course of life that God himself established, and these people are getting in the way and acting like God to deny people the pursuit of their happiness. And it's all born out of lies. And that's really what this fraud is all about. It's just a lie. It's one lie after another lie that's attempting to be justified as the truth. And it's not going to be. We're going to clearly demonstrate, as we have done up to this point, we will continue to do with you, Jim, because we can see that you're dedicated to seeking out the truth, and the people will decide for themselves. We know that the American people are smart enough to see a fraud scheme when there is one. And we've when you labor to put the truth together and put it out there, then we, the people, are going to have to demand something better from our country and from our world and for our children. So I'm going to continue on to the next slide, Jim. And this was the other set of summons that came out on April the 4th. And again, this one was served. This is for Terry. This one was served just like the other ones, like I said before, in a plainclothes person. Now, here's the thing. If this is a police officer delivering this, and this is yet another time, in addition to the other times we mentioned, of after they were already there alleging that Amy was in imminent danger, that nobody is acting to secure her safety. Yet they're pretty good at delivering these documents and kind of terrorizing us and leading us to believe, well, we got to do this, that, or the other thing. So here we are. Here's one for Terry, trying to get us into the court on April the 6th, which we eventually went to. So Terry didn't go to the one on April the 6th. She was staying home with the children. And I went, and yet I was the one who was put in jail. Pretty strange, isn't it? And how someone can have a summons document for them, and wouldn't that be a form of contempt of court? But Terry was never proceeded against for contempt of court at any point from this point and onward. So, is there influence by somebody in the court system or with the police as a form of protection? That's my question.
Hey, Terry, how are you?
Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I know you're there. I know you're there observing, and I just wanted to say hello.
I wanted to point out on that there that if you look under where it says attention, this is important. A petition saying your child is dependent, neglected, or abused has been filed. A copy of the petition showing the name of the person who filed it is attached. Okay, so there was no.
We never received a petition. Okay.
We didn't.
So
I don't think we saw an actual petition until we showed up in court and the public defender.
No,
produced it.
I didn't get a copy of the petition until the attorney that represented us eventually. He got a copy of it, which was about a couple weeks later into this. So there was no petition attached, even though the document says, "Oh yeah, there was a petition attached." Right? Well, there wasn't one, and so just another point that here we are yet again with another service of summons, and yet no attempt to secure the safety of our
and
of our
there's
child.
no court stamp on that one.
Yeah, and no, like I said, with the other ones, the other summons, there was no court stamp on any of the other summons. There was no court stamp on these summons. So if it's coming from the court and it's entered in court, shouldn't that have a court stamp on it? Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, one would think so. I mean, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's take a quick commercial break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll pick back up right here where we left off and keep going through these documents. We appreciate you joining us here today on the broadcast. I'm here with Mark and Terry Stamen, also known as the Forgotten American on Twitter. Why don't you go ahead, before we take a break here, why don't you go ahead and give out your email addresses, Facebook pages, anything like that you want, to Twitter handles, anything else that you want to give out to people so they can reach out to you and find out more about your case.
Thank you, Jim. And as you know that we've been working to not only expose what's happening to us and our family, but all of the other families that this is happening to across the country and across the world. And so we are starting an organization called Let Our Children Go. And so we're still getting that up and running, but people can reach out to me on Twitter at No Longer Ignored. And I have my direct messages open. So whether I'm following you or not, anybody can send me a direct message through Twitter at No Longer Ignored, or you can send me an email at letourchildrengo@protonmail.com. So anybody that knows, anybody that needs support or is dealing with the unlawful taking of their child by the state, they can reach out to us.
Okay, very good. You've done a tremendous amount of work. My hat's off to you for all the people that you've helped. And they're doers, folks. Mark and Terry are doers. They're not talkers. They're doers. And they have, despite obviously the tragedy surrounding having all of your children taken, I'm going to read their names here: Amy, Noah, Elena, Daisy, Teddy, Bo, David, and Abby. Again, Amy, Noah, Elena, Daisy, Teddy, Bo, David, and Abby. Despite the trauma that could be associated with having all your children kidnapped, they've still worked hard to help other folks, and they've just put a tremendous effort out, and my hat's off to them. Thanks so much, Mark and Terry, and we appreciate you.
If I could just say real quick that
sure.
Our children were taken from us unlawfully. Our children were kidnapped, and we continue to fight for our children. We have not abandoned our children. We continue to fight to rescue our children, and we love our children so very much. And we have not moved on with our life. We continue to this day to fight to reclaim our children and to rescue them back to their loving parents.
Very good. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come back on the other side. We're going to pick back up with this. I'm going to go ahead and mute your microphone out here. We'll be back after these brief messages here on Northwest Liberty News. with Mark and Terry Stamen. Please hang around until after the break.
PatriotPrepared.com carries the leading brands of storable food from Legacy and Heaven's Harvest. Patriot Prepared. Our name says it all. We're dedicated to empowering you to be self-reliant and confident in any circumstance. Whether you want to be prepared in the event of an emergency or you're an outdoor sports enthusiast, PatriotPrepared.com has prepackaged meals and kits for your entire family. Legacy, Heaven's Harvest are known for high-quality, great-tasting, GMO-free, nutritious food with no chemical preservatives. Simple to prepare, easy to store, gluten-free and organic high-quality nutrition options with a 25-year shelf life. You can't beat the feeling of being food secure when you need it most. So go to PatriotPrepared.com right now to pick up your supply of high-quality storable food for your family, because it makes good sense to be prepared. That's PatriotPrepared.com.
Jordan Hall's journalistic reporting has been cited in the New York Times, Newsweek, Maxim, The Today Show, the UK Daily Mail, and more. He has shaped the Christian news media for years, but has also landed in the mainstream press more times than you can count. And as a Montanan, he wants to train you, his fellow Montanans, on how to beat the liberal media at their own game. At Red Wave, Montana on October 24th, he'll host a live stream conference for Montana conservative bloggers to learn how to write to make a difference in the world. Go to redwavemontana.com.
That's right, folks, redwavemontana.com. If you're in Montana, it's a free course. Check it out and learn how to produce articles so fast that the other side can't keep up with the truth. And that's what we want to do here on this broadcast. And that should be everyone's goal, is to put out truth and not put out lies. And we do appreciate your support here. You can go to northwestlibertynews.com. That's northwestlibertynews.com to support this broadcast that way. You can go to Patreon and become a Patreon, or you can go to GoFundMe and type in Support Truth and News. Or if none of that suits you, please just click the like button and share the video around so we can get the word out and bring on guests like we have today, Mark and Terry Stamen, who have had their 7 children kidnapped in Kentucky. And their seven children's, the names of their 7 children are Amy, Noah, Elena, Daisy, Teddy, Bo, David, and Abby. And we're delighted to have them here on the broadcast to tell their story. They have a voluminous amount of documents, gigabytes of documentation that I have that they have sent me. And there's no doubt that they have had their children taken unlawfully, which when your children are taken from you unlawfully, it's called kidnapping. So the title Kidnapped in Kentucky is very appropriate. And we want to, again, thank them for being on the broadcast. Let me unmute their microphone and welcome them back to the broadcast. There we go. Mark and Terry Stamen, thanks so much for hanging out with us after the break. We appreciate you taking your time to come here on the show and tell people about your really horrific experience with Kentucky CPS.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's like I said before, it's an honor for us to be here because we need more people like you, investigative reporters who are, at one time, our country, we had reporters who sought the truth, right? And it was all about seeking out and finding the truth and holding people accountable who engaged in lies and lawlessness and with a view toward justice for all, right? But it seems like things have gotten so bad to where now there's just an all-out attack on our people from a number of different fronts, from deprivations of our rights and respect to, and pick one, whether it be free speech or owning a gun or, the security of your home, being secure in your home. So we do appreciate you and being able to, to be a man, like you said, where are the men, right? Who are going to stand up and speak the truth and defend their families and defend their country, to defend the truth and our way of life, our right to pursue our happiness. So again, Jim, thank you. But I just want to continue on with the storyline for the sake of time. We can pick up on the documents at the end of the last summons that we showed.
You want to go back to the docs? Yes, back to the docs.
Well, we can go back to the docs and page forward one or two until you come up to where it says the sample. So you go up, I think one more after that. Yeah, so stop right there. We'll come back to that in a minute, Jim. But really, what I want to pick up on is how the storyline unfolded and how I ended up going down to the court. Because, as you could see, we had received the summons on April the 4th, but there was no issuance of an ECO on April the 4th, which there should have been according to the court rules. But what happened was, we did secure legal counsel. And so, he told us that, well, initially he told me, he said, well, you don't need to go down there. He said, just give me this letter from Emily Beckman, your nurse practitioner, saying that our daughter was in good health and that should be enough. And then a little bit later after that, he said, well, no, maybe you should just come on down and with the letter. And then I went down to his office on the morning of April 6th around 11 a.m. and just to check in with him. And he said, well, why don't you just come with Amy and we can just show that, she's in good health, that, she's not in any imminent danger, that, that she's fine, which she was. And so I went back to our residence and, I asked Terry and Amy to get ready that we were going to go down. And so they did. And then we, from there, it was, it was just really strange because when I pulled into our place that day, Amy's in the backyard jumping on a trampoline with her younger sister, Daisy, all with these allegations that she's in imminent danger, So, she was a happy, healthy, normal adolescent girl, just having fun with her sister. And she's got to have her day interrupted so we can go down and tend to this. And we're thinking, well, best case, that we'll just go down here, show this document, won't be a problem. Amy will, be presented. And then after that, well, we'll be home. So we go ahead down to the court and, we go into the outside waiting area. And of course, we're met by Shaniqua Potter. And, she attempts to be like Miss Cordial with me, which I thought was pretty offensive because here she is attempting to kidnap my kids and she's wanting to be friendly with me, which I thought repulsive. And, but, I was polite and, she wanted to get all this information, which, it was kind of hard for me to, just to get to that point when you're walking in here. You just want to get in there, present your evidence to the judge, and then hopefully turn around and go out the same door you came in. Well, as it unfolded, they took Amy off to the side without our attorney present. The CPS person started interviewing Amy. And then after she was done, then she came back out and then she went off with the guardian ad litem, all of this without representation. I asked my attorney to go with them and he was like, oh, they'll be okay. And so I don't know what they were saying. But here's my bigger concern, Jim, is that as this scene unfolded on this day, okay, you're alleging that my daughter's in imminent danger of dying, and you're not going to immediately take her to the hospital, that she's so malnourished and the hospital's waiting for her, according to other documents that we've seen, and supposedly, these statements by Dr. Langford that, they're just going about a routine process. And yet no one's really concerned about getting her supposed needed medical care. So, the court gets called to session. The proceedings began with a judge. Her name was Judith Bartholomew. And she had recently been appointed by Governor Matt Bevin. We were probably one of the first cases that went through her division in Division 9. And as the scene unfolded, we proceeded to show the document of good health. And then, of course, the other side said that they had a document from Emily Beckman, which I'll include in a subsequent interview. I don't have it for you today, where they, said that, oh, she was going to rescind that because she was going to go with the doctor's diagnosis. But I have evidence that this is another forged document that they used in order to create a little bit of, to counter the good health document. And they alleged that we had forged the good health document in court that day, which a simple question of Emily Beckman would have put that to rest. But nobody would want to investigate. Nobody wants to ask those questions as to the legitimacy of any of this. So as it unfolded, what happened was, Amy stood up in court and she said, that she didn't want to go to the hospital and that she was fine. And she got lectured by the judge, and she was ordered there were two people there who probably, one of them should not have been there. One was Julie Asif, again, the brother of the Louisville Metro Police Department officer. And the judge ordered her to be taken to the hospital. And then they proceeded against me for the holding or the detainment that later became a contempt charge that I was never officially notified of. So what happened after that is they took me behind the other door and they took Amy, out the door she came in. And then that's where I sat in the jail for the 22 hours after that. But it was really interesting what happened after that, Jim, because these people did not take Amy to the hospital. She should have been transported probably a little bit differently with government officials involved. But, you talk about court orders and obeying, a judge and whatnot. They said, oh, yeah, we'll take Amy right to the hospital. What they did was they brought her back to our residence, and she was moving things out of our house back down to the house of Julie Asa. And it wasn't until several hours later until they eventually took her to the hospital. And I find it really strange, again, as to the legitimacy of any of this, that if you're saying that a child is in imminent danger, all of these points of negligence and the lack of compliance with a judge's order raises question as to the legitimacy and who's really in control of what's going on here and how are you getting away with all of this stuff. And so, I was in jail, and then of course, Terry was, on the scene with these people as they came and went. And there was additional police that came by later in the evening, according to her. And, these things aren't really important to get into right now, because then there's just all these additional questions. But the fact is that, Terry did release, the children, and, but they did not release me immediately from jail. And so that became a problem. And then there was all of these weird changes in how the charges were filed in the court, and that she was tracking in respect to the number of counts and, the amount of money and things of that sort. So, one of the things that, happened in the court that I didn't mention a couple minutes ago, Jim, was that, the judge made a phone call to our residents during the proceeding and ordered Terry to release the kids. And Terry said that,
on speakerphone.
It was on speakerphone for the entire court. And she said, no one's going to take my children, or something like that. And she hung up the phone. And so, it's like, here we have, phone calls being made by judges to, to order a person in their home to release their kids. And it's like, what kind of process is that? You would think that, there wouldn't be a dispatching of the police with actual paperwork. And, there's just like all of these weird things happening, and none of it appears to be legitimate in accordance with due process and the protection that we, the people, are supposed to have.
Right. And so what actually happened with that is that I got a call from somebody else telling me that they had put Mark in jail, and that if I did not release the children, that they would hold him. They would hold him until I released the children.
You see, you wonder how this happens is because they get away with it once and they realize, well, no one really is going to come after us. And then they do it 3 times and 5 times and 10 times. And then it becomes just normal operating procedure for these people to violate your constitutional rights and kidnap your children, because nobody ever comes after them, or nobody ever gets thrown in jail, or nobody ever gets arrested, or they have this immunity now where they're immune. They think they are. They think they're immune from any law, lawful conduct. That's what happens, folks, because no one does anything. They just keep getting bolder and bolder and bolder, like any criminal. Bolder and bolder and bolder, until now it's just absolute naked lawlessness. It's absolute lawlessness is what we're dealing with. Just look at the docs. Please go ahead and continue.
Thank you, Jim. I want to go on back in for the sake of our time. I know you said we might have a little bit more, and that's great if we need to stretch this out a little bit. But we're going to bring forth some evidence here, which is going to depict a little bit deeper the extent of the fraud, because we started seeing, later on in the process, and I'm kind of moving the timeline up a little bit just so people can see that there's really something highly suspect going on here. And I'm just going to, so in respect to if we can go back to the documents, you'll see the cover page here for sample. But in the course of our investigation, we have identified by evidence that we think that there is a person acting, we believe, as a mole in a ring to affect, and there may be more than one, to affect the color of law kidnapping of people's kids in Jefferson County, Kentucky.
Guarantee you there's more than one. I guarantee you there's more than one, but please continue.
Yeah. Okay. So basically what we have is, in the course of our investigation, we started seeing some similarities from Julie Asif and letters that she had written to us in years past and other correspondence. And then we were able to accumulate additional evidence. And we took these writings and we compared them against some of the court documents. And we started seeing a lot of similarities in the writing and in the writing. And, in one of our previous interviews, Jim, I showed some evidence of a computer-based imaging operation possibility. And we have a lot more to bring forth, but that was just kind of like just the initial presentation to at least raise the question. Now, as we go forward today, I'm going to add just another little layer, because there's going to be a whole lot more coming forward. But I think that the people are going to see a definitive correlation in respect to the writings of this person and their connection to a whole lot of people and their influence to a court system. And I believe that the court system in Jefferson County is corrupted by infiltration. Terry made mention of, that these people are domestic terrorists. And, well, where do they come from? And are they bought off? How much money is being circulated? Where are the kids going? What's happening? People can say, oh, your kids are fine. Your kids are fine. We're giving them a better life. But what's happening behind closed doors with our children? Okay. You talk about taking them to Disney World and this place, and we know what happens down there, allegedly, in some respects with other people. But I want to move in to a couple of these things, and I'm not going to identify specifically where on these different documents are, but some of the documents people have seen already in our previous interviews, and they can go back and look for themselves based if they want to know more. But eventually we're going to detail exactly where these things are. And I just want to say right out, any attempt at this point, from this point forward, with the amount of information we're going to be putting out there, is going to show the extent of the atrocities and the travesties that we, the people in America, will not tolerate. I will not tolerate it with my family. I will not tolerate in respect to my children. We will not allow this lie to be justified, Jim. But I want to at least put out a little bit of a teaser for the people, because there's a lot more coming. So if you can go ahead to the next slide, I'm going to show you some correlations in the images. And what we have here is definitive writing characteristics. Okay. Now, we can spend a minute looking at this, but this image on the left came from a party invitation of a piece of evidence that we were able to acquire from a party that these people had put on from an individual. And this image on the right is on a court document. And it's an exact representation with a slight modification of this image going back to 2005. Okay. So if you were to take either one of those, and I have these on PowerPoint, and you layer it over, is an exact image, with the exception of just the part on the far left. And that would just be an easy modification. All right. So if you go on to the next slide, you will see an image on the left, and I identified it as an infiltrator, because that's what we have here, is an infiltrator by the evidence. Okay. And the document on the right is extracted from a court envelope that was sent to us in November of 2016. You will see a definitive correlation in respect to the shape of the P. And so, if you're sending me process as making it appear to be something that it is not, that's also mail fraud. Okay. And we will show the details of this and documents exactly where these are in the days and weeks ahead. You go on to the next slide, you will see an annotation of the letter U from this letter that we got from Julie Asif in 2013. Okay, we're able to extract all these correlated images and compare them. But here's how a U is written by her, and then on the court document. You go on to the next slide, you will see a definitive correlation between how she writes her ends with a hook and what we have on a court document on the right, the no and the shape of the O on the O has the same opening.
No, let me just stop for a second. Is this all from the same person? This is all from one single person, as far as you know. All these letters that you're showing, all these correlating letters and phrases.
Based on the evidence that we have, it all points to one person.
Okay.
There could be more involved. There could be, additional images. It appears to us that these images are either photoshopped or they exist in a library somewhere from documents either that she writes or maybe even other people write. That's why I said in a previous interview that, anyone in Jefferson County, Kentucky who has anything that looks like anything that we're going to be bringing forward, please dig into your documents because it could be something that has been happening over an extended period of time.
Okay, so let me just get this clear here. This person that we're seeing with these different letters that we're seeing pop up here, these letters that we're going through right now. This person, your contention is this person is sort of infiltrated inside the Kentucky CPS, and they are, and of course this is alleged, they are an operative for a group that kidnaps kids. They are a operative for a group that does medical experiments. I mean, maybe you may not have all the answers, but what in your estimation is this infiltrator's role, and do they do it within the confines of the law, or are they working outside the confines of the law, or do you not know the specific answers to those questions? And just answer as much as you know, and you don't know.
Well, I do know that, there's a lot of Title IV money that flows out in the taking of people's kids. Okay. I do know that this woman, Julie Asif, is not legally married to Terry's father. So she could be identified as a non-family member and get big Title IV money payments. And, where does that money go? Is it circulated among certain officials to facilitate this scheme? I'm just asking questions. I mean, is there child trafficking involved?
Talk about what they did to Elena. Surgery.
Yeah, I mean, is it about medical experimentation for kids, to allege that they have conditions that they don't have? So more people get paid in the healthcare industry. I mean, when you hear that, oh, we're going to take your child to Disney World, or we're taking her to Florida, or we're taking her here, or we're taking her there, it kind of raises questions as to really what's going on. And then there's additional evidence that we have that kind of puts dots on the board that we'll be bringing forth. But we think that this evidence points to that she's an operative, probably among many others, and is aligned with doctors, CPS officials who run these schemes. And you will see in the additional slides here the correlation. And so again, Jim, this isn't just about 15 or so images. Okay, we have over 1,100 images, all correlating to documents that we know have been given to us by her. This letter that she wrote in 2013 attempted to get us into a dependency situation, which we think was an attempt to lead us into this very thing that we're in now for the taking of our children. And all the evidence will point and show that, that this is the case. So, when you bring this before the people in your system of government, why is no one investigating and prosecuting these things? Why are we allowing this to continue? Why, in light of the transmission of all of the evidence that we've submitted, have these people not been arrested, or have there been no investigation? Why has no one contacted us to ask for additional information? Why has this system not been shut down? Why has it been allowed to continue? Why did Tara Haggerty become the chief judge of the Jefferson County Family Court in respect to all of these things, happening that we're disclosing and will continue to disclose? Because the truth needs to be put forth to the people, and the American people are smart enough to figure it out for themselves. Jim, can we continue on with a couple more slides here? I just want to continue so you can kind of see.
Sure. And I want you to send me after the show. I want you to send me as much information about this person as you can. I'm going to have one of my deep dive investigators take a look at it. Please go ahead and continue.
Okay, so this image on the left is from the party invitation from 2005, and the one on the right is from a court document for one of our children. But you can see a definite correlation between the narrow and on the narrow portion on the left, and then the wide portion on the right. And if you were to zero in on that part of it, it definitely shows like a little bit of an addition. So it could be even a Photoshop there on the right-hand side, like there was a part of it added. So, or it's just a very similar writing style, you know? So if you continue on to the next one, you'll see a definitive correlation in the A, you know, there, and the angle of it with, you know, the hash mark on the left, and then of an image and a word on a court document. Continue on. Now this is where
that's a pretty distinct A right there. That's a pretty distinct. No one makes their A's like that, hardly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you're going to tell me that of all these images, that it would be like from 4 or 5 individuals on like 2 or 3 documents. I mean, that'd be kind of a hard stretch to accept. But if you look at this image, this is from one of the documents already presented in a previous interview on the left in respect to our name. And the image on the right is, you know, presented as if from CPS, and the image on the right is from a court document. Now, I would find it really hard to believe that Shaniqua Potter would write with that kind of similarity to someone in the Jefferson County Family Court, which of course raises the question, okay, are CPS and the Jefferson County Family Court in collusion with each other? And they're supposed to be distinct entities. They're supposed to be distinct entities, so that when parents go in, that they're going to have, you know, a fair hearing, a fair process. But when you have evidence of this and these kind of controls, and you're wanting me to go back into the court system, to this court system, to try to, you know, get my kids back with this kind of a thing going on? Or is there a place to appeal if you see these kind of images and correlation and unlawful associations going on? I mean, it raises questions as to the legitimacy of the entire court system. So why hasn't it been shut down? Or why are people continuing to operate like this? So continue on, Jim, to the next slide. So here's a distinct U in respect to a court document compared to a word on the letter in 2013. You can go on to the next slide. You can see a distinction here in a unique Y. Now, the way I did this, Jim, is I went through every letter on the alphabet, A through Z, in respect to the source documents that we have.
Go back, yeah.
In respect to the source documents that we have. And I was able to, this is how I found these letters. And but the Y was this Y was one of the first ones that really stuck out to me. And, you know, sometimes people who are participating in illegal activities will identify what it is they're doing or why they're doing it in their documents. And this Y is one Y that is unlike any other Y in all of the court documents that we have. It appears in one place.
Listen, man, I'm not a handwriting expert, or nor do I claim to be, but I can tell you just from a person that's got 2 eyes and you know, some functioning brain cells, I can tell you that these are the same people. The same person's writing these. It's no way that if you're telling me that the ones on the left are all from the same person, and the ones on the right are suspected to be, I think yes, the ones on the right are all from the same person on the left. So far, I haven't seen anything that even brings up a mild amount of suspicion for me that it's not the same. It's
right.
Almost so nailed them every time.
Right. I just want to say, Jim, you know, and that's a good point, because it's very clear. I'm sure people can see for themselves. But if you look at the Y, okay, it's Y money. Why Amy? Are you telling me that's why you did it, for Amy and for the money? You know, I mean, there's something there, right? And this Y doesn't appear in any other of our the court documents that we have, which is pretty strange, because you would think, wow, usually someone who's writing would write similarly in some way. So, you know, across a full spectrum of documents, but it's just one Y like that, and only in that one location. And we'll identify exactly where that is later. Go on to the next slide. So if you look at this M, Jim, this is again similar to this letter that we got in 2013, and we'll show exactly where this is. And we have the original, we have this document. We have the court document. This is from this actually is from a court document that has a court stamp on it. You can kind of see the definitive correlation, especially there in the middle, with the little bolder part. Go on to the next slide. And again, here there's the letter P with the hook, and you know, kind of like the broad part in the middle on a court document. And this last image, Jim, this is really one of the real definitive kickers for me, because here's one where, and this is a document that people have already seen. It's on a CHFS document, and then the one on the right is from a court document. And you can kind of see the unique type of writing style with the loop and then the pointed end on the right. And you're telling me that this is coming from Shaniqua Potter on the left and the one on the right is coming from the court? I mean, it's kind of, like I said, these are, 20 something images, and we have over 1,100 of these images.
So let me ask you a question, just a flat out question here. Are you contending, or is it your contention that this person is forging signatures of the judge? Is she forging the judge's signatures? Is that what you're saying? Is that kind of one of the things you're saying?
Well, Jim, I think the evidence will show us that it's highly questionable as to whether or not we have a legitimate judge's signature on any of our documents, which would then therefore negate all of the documents and make them illegal, which again is another point to show the kidnapping of our children. And the other thing that this shows, Jim, and we've got a lot more, okay, is that this is a conspiracy, okay, where two or more, okay, under federal law, Chapter 13, 18 U.S. Code, Chapter 13, Section 241 and 242. It talks about an attempt to kidnap, or where two or more people conspire. Okay, a conspiracy is two people who join together to accomplish an objective unlawfully. Okay, and what these images, what all of this evidence shows is a conspiracy to kidnap our kids, deprive us of our rights, and this is a big deal, because if it happened to us and we had a CPS person involved, a supervisor, a judge, the police, and these images go back many years, and they're using this on court documents to fabricate documents and come up with schemes to case frame people in order to extort money from the federal government, from we the people, the American taxpayer. Don't we deserve an answer and justice on these things? And then it raises the question, how many other families and children have been taken like this? And this has been running on like this. So we have a lot more to bring, Jim. There's so much more to this, but we're pretty certain that the American people are going to be able to smell a rat when they can see and smell one and do something about it. Yeah, so there's one more thing I want to make mention of, Jim. As we were discovering the suspiciousness of these documents in our court motions, we attempted to put forth motions and get an answer from Tara Haggerty to get her signature on a document, but she would never sign the document. And I've got a motion showing that where we presented it, and she said, "Oh, I'll get it to you later." So, I do think that there is a coordination among these people to affect these things. And, in showing this, Jim, I never wanted to come out and do this, but, it's been 4.5 years and we have run the entire length of our system of government looking for justice, okay, through all channels of the United States Department of Justice, the state of Kentucky, and they all ignore us. They all turn us away. They all hide behind various things, our legislators, senators, representatives, okay, and trying to get attorneys and representation, and nobody wants to do anything on our behalf. And they have to come to this point to put this out before the American people. Here's my bigger concern. What happens to my children now when these people are exposed, okay? What is going to happen? And what happens to other children who may have been taken like this? All right. We have a big problem. Okay. And we attempted to work it. We attempted to resolve this, to investigate it. And the system has failed us. And we're going to show the extent of how the system has failed us so that we, the people, can rise up and do something to stop this. So, Jim, I just appreciate you allowing us this opportunity to present this to the people. But it's just horrible what's happening, and we have the evidence. Okay, and it's not just a few images here and there. Like I said, it's several hundred. It's over 1,000 images across many different documents.
Well, there's much more to come. Mark and Terry Lynn Stamen, give us your email addresses, websites, Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, anything like that before we go, so people can find out more about you guys and what you got going on, and support you and send you well wishes and prayers, that type of thing.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody that wants to reach us can send me a direct message on Twitter at No Longer Ignored. You can just go to Twitter and go to my homepage at No Longer Ignored, and there will be an envelope there to where you can send me a private message, and or you can contact us through email, letourchildrengo at protonmail.com. Letourchildrengo at protonmail.com. And so anybody who wants to reach out about what we've presented in our own situation, anybody in law enforcement or the government that wants, to discuss and acquire further information, or any families that are wanting to help to stop the unlawful separation of children from their families, and they want support. We have a great support system with families all over the world, actually, not just in the United States, but in other countries that are working in their own countries to stop this, because it's a worldwide system that is enabling children to be taken from their families. And we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share the information, to continue to seek justice and a remedy. And I just thank you so much for all the work that you do for not only us, but other families that are fighting for their children.
I stand on the shoulders of you and Mark and all the work that you've done. So I do appreciate everything that you've done, certainly. And you've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of parents and been a support system for them. And my hat's off, of course, to you for that. Thanks so much for joining us here today on the program, Mark and Terry Lynn Stamen. Will be another episode, I'm sure of this. I say episode, it's almost an episode. Another interview as we continue next week. We don't have that date worked out yet, but it'll be either Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, probably next week. So,
yes, and Jim, we're actually going to be bringing an attorney on with us to discuss the unlawfulness of this whole process. So that
excellent.
may be something people want to turn into a
very good.
special.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll make note of that when we send out the announcement. Mark and Terry Lynn Stamen, thanks so much again for joining us here on the broadcast. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time here. Talk to you real soon.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Take care, Mark. All right, folks, there goes Mark and Terry Lynn Stamen. We appreciate them being on the broadcast with us today. If you want to support this show, you can go to northwestlibertynews.com. That's northwestlibertynews.com. And click on Support Independent News. New broadcast I have here from Montana Gazette Radio. You can go to montanagazetteradio.com or montanadailygazette.com. We'll be back here in about 45 minutes with the next episode for that. Please pray for Mark and Terry Lynn Stamen and all those families that have had their children unlawfully taken by CPS. And it's the amount of it's voluminous. It's in the millions at this point now, for sure. Thanks so much for looking here in the broadcast. Till next time, this is James White for Northwest Liberty News, saying bye now.